I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 225 years ago, our founding fathers, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Constitution. This momentous decree came as great beacon of light, of hope, to millions of Americans who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 225 years later, the American still is not free. 225 years later, the life of the American is still crippled by the manacles of poor government and the chains of bad legislation. 225 years later, the Americans live on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 225 years later, the American is still languished in the corners of internet society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men, as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the American people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that this bank of justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation, and so we've come to cash this check. A check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take tranquilizing drug of gradualism. This is the time to make real promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of liberal justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of liberal injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of American legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 2012 is not an end, but a beginning. And those hope the American needed to blow off steam and be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. And there will neither be rest nor tranquility in America until the American is granted his internet right. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people, who stand in the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of diligency and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the internet community must not lead to a distrust of all senators. For many of our legislative brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone, and as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the American is victim of the unspeakable horrors of legislative brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain in the motels of highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the American's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by a sign stating censored. We cannot be satisfied as long as an American in Mississippi cannot search the internet for copyrighted material, and an American in New York believes he has nothing to search for. No. We are not satisfied. We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness from a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of the great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come from fresh and narrow jail cells. And some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom, left you battered by storms and persecutions and staggering by winds of legislative brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. And so, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all websites are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former internet browsers and the sons of former congressmen will be able to sit down together at the table of internet brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even Washington, D.C., a city of sweltering hate and injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by what they search for on the internet, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in the House of Representatives, with its vicious haters and its governors having their lips dripping with the words of censorship and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little American boys and little American girls will be able to join hands with the sons and daughters of congressmen as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exhalated, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain. The crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the south with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jingling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountain top, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prejudiced hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout of Mountain Tennessee. Let freedom ring from the hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, we will allow freedom to ring. When we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men, white men, Jews, Gentiles, Protestants, Catholics, will all be able to join hands together and sing in the words of the old American spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Martin Luther King would have wanted freedom among the internet community, and so should you. Say no to Sopa and Pipa. Let freedom ring across the internet.